Okay, we'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's Pig Talk. As usual, just need everybody to participate. Gonna kind of go over a few things and discuss what's working for people. Had originally hoped that we would have a veterinarian on board tonight. Just to clue you in a little bit, I've been talking to Pipestone Vet Clinic for the last couple weeks. Not only about discussing things tonight, which they declined for, they kind of want to get things situated with us before they start giving out any type of advice. Today we talked back and forth a lot, and Pipestone is a vet clinic in Minnesota. They're in Iowa. They're in Indiana. They specialize in hog production. They also do a lot of work with Premier One. They do, which does the fencing. They do a lot with them with sheep and lambs, and they do a lot of webinars. And I haven't even brought it to the board yet, but what I've been talking to them about is doing some webinars with us, with the Red Wattle Association, doing some consultation. We have a lot of people in a lot of areas that don't have hog vets necessarily at their disposal. But Pipestone or somebody else like them would be interested in working with your local vet to kind of help figure out if you're having problems, providing the rope test, providing the blood test, kind of reading what the results are and help to determine what the problems are and what needs to be done to handle those problems. We've kind of gotten to the point where probably by next week, I'm going to come to the board with a proposal from Pipestone to see if that's something that we want to work with them on. And also, I've talked to a couple other heritage breeds to see if maybe they want to come on board to kind of help, cost share some of this stuff. And there's quite a bit of interest from a couple other breeds as well. So I don't have any answers on that tonight, but hopefully we can kind of discuss that here in the next week. And there's just an awful lot of people that seem to have some problems here and there. They don't have a good source, and I think we need to try to come up with a good source to help some people when they're needing the help. One of the things that, I guess I'd like everybody to kind of share how they quarantine their new hogs when they come in and what process they go through. Let's kind of talk about that a little bit and see what's working for people and what isn't working.
I'll go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so this is Molly from the Copper Penny Farm. So as for quarantine, basically I haven't had to quarantine a whole lot since all of my hogs have came from one farm, and the others that I have were born and bred here. But when I did bring in my boar, it did come from another farm. I made sure that I keep them in a location that's on the far end of my farm. So it's probably like 2 acres or so over. I put them in a pen by themselves and I leave them there for 60 days. And that's just to make sure that first they're switching over feed, make sure the feed goes well, make sure that they acclimate to the environment that they're in, since they are in a pretty wooded environment. It's different than most. I make sure they acclimate and that they, thrive out there and they're hardy with no illnesses. I will say, though, that when I send stock out from my place, I do try to encourage people to do that, to segregate them off, but a lot of people don't. And if I know that they're not going to, I do make sure to give the animals that leave my farm, I give them a shot of like penicillin or Exceed. I use Exceed, but I give them a shot of Exceed before they leave. And I try to give them, everybody, a tube of tripectate also, to help out with scouring and everything. But I think a lot of people feel like they don't need to keep their animals into a segregation unit, away, and quarantine them, because they feel like there is no diseases or viral issues really that can hit their farm. And I think that's a very misconception that is out there that people don't understand, especially if you are bringing in unvaccinated stock, or sending out, unvaccinated stock. Just my 2 cents.
Anybody else?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Good.
Good. When I was just here at the original farm, which is like a little farmstead, I put them on one end of the barn when I brought them in. I had 4 different pens, so I would put them in the far end of the pen and there for 2 weeks. Working with Keystone, he recommends at least 3 weeks, minimum 3 weeks for quarantine. Now with the new place up there, I actually use this place as a quarantine. So I brought a couple of young gilts in for crossbreeding from Alabama. I left them here they were actually here about 5 weeks before I took them up to the new farm. And once we're totally moved to the new farm, then there'll be separate pen area for incoming stock. If I bring new stuff in, I'm on the fence whether I'm going to bring anything new in, just because of the risk of disease. So that's what I've done in the past.
Anybody else? So I'll add this. So when I brought red wattles in, I went and met with our vet. We had not had outside production for a while. And my vet that I used was Pipestone, because we have a clinic with them that's 20 miles from where I live. So the first question was, what's your hog pressure around your facility? What's your history on your ground, because you're going to be out on dirt? Was there a lot of hogs raised there in years past? Because for all the benefits of raising on dirt, the disadvantage is that things live in the soil. So those were 2 things that we looked at. And then the third was, are you going to bring multiple sources in? And the answer was yes. So what was recommended to me and what we do is, when the hogs come in, we isolate them away from the other hogs for an extended period of time, 30 to 45 days. But we bring a hog to those animals, okay? And the reason why is because I'm in Iowa. It's a big hog production area. And so I have to be critical of PERS and PDV and Circo and MICO and all of those things that your herd or the other herd may have. And then it's a tricky game, because if a hog comes in with that, they shed the titers to the other hog, then it spikes, then they give it back to the original hogs. So you want to see if you're having any issues, and that's how we see that. We take a hog to them, and they stay with them for 3 weeks. The other thing that we do is we do rope tests. We do it every 6 months on our herd. Rope tests are very easy. And by doing these rope tests, we can get an updated idea through our vet. We send the samples to Iowa State. If we're having any changes on our herd health, we haven't incurred PERS. We're PERS free. We don't vaccinate. We don't vaccinate for anything right now, except with FarrowSure Gold. We do that because we're in a high hog area. We don't give any shots pre-farrow because where we keep our red wattles have never had hogs in that area. So there's nothing in the dirt and we haven't encountered any issues. But I will say this, and Molly can attest to this, we get a lot of phone calls from a lot of people that are having mummified pigs, they're having stillborns, they're having sows abort litters. And it's not good for anybody to make assumptions that they have this or they have that. And I see that happen all the time on Facebook. You just can't do that. I can't tell Matt he's got something. He's got to work with his vet. Just like if Walt can't tell Joe or anything like that, because we don't know. And the vet doesn't know. And the vet will never make an assumption until he's ran the proper test. Now, Matt, I know you did the rope test. Why don't you explain that to everybody so they can understand just how easy that is?
Sure. Let me just back up first and tell you the process that I went through. I didn't have stillborns and stuff until a certain point in time. And when I started losing piglets, I worked with my local vet, who's a large animal vet, but not a hog vet. We sent testing stuff to Cornell, and we came back with E. coli and some other stuff. We never came back with anything else, but the testing was almost $800 every time I sent it out. That's a lot of money. So I dealt with that for about 18 months before I got in touch with our vet, Dr. Anthony. And Dr. Anthony, when I started telling him what I had, was convinced that I had PRRS. One of the things that people need to understand is that to ship from another state into your state, they're not testing for where the hog is coming from. They're testing for what this state wants. In other words, I shipped from Wisconsin to New York. We had a vet do the vet inspection out there, but because New York doesn't require a PRRS test or anything, any of the other blood tests, they weren't required. So when I went back and looked at my paperwork, when I was going through this with Dr. Anthony, there was nothing required because New York didn't require it. The receiving state didn't require it. So one of the first things he did, Dr. Anthony, was the rope test. And the rope test, they have a kit, they ship it to you. They're very reasonably priced. It comes in multiple strands. You hang it in a group of hogs, and then basically with a glove, you take all the saliva, put it into a test tube that is in the package, and it's already pre-labeled for the Iowa lab. Ship it out to them, and I had results within 2 days. In addition to the rope test, you can also do, the first test we actually did was when I castrated multiple piglets, young piglets. You can do a castration test where you put all the testicles and stuff together, and then you put it in cheesecloth and you squeeze those juices into a test tube and send that out for shipping. So that was my first test. The second was the rope test, and their fees were very, very reasonable. And both tests came back negative for me. And that's what finally got us. He's like, okay, you're PRRS negative. At that point, he's like, you have parvo. He said, that's the only other thing can be with the stillborns you have, and the other issues you have parvo. FarrowSure Gold B, and everybody's seen, most everybody's seen. The first litter that I had, 9, everybody survived. Much healthier offspring. The placenta was pink and purple, not brown. So, it's you got to go through the testing, but you need a vet. My local vets couldn't do it. They didn't understand because they're not hog people, which goes back to what you're trying to accomplish, which I think is much needed.
Yeah, we do the rope test, and we do it a little bit different. We transfer it. We squeeze the rope mat off into a baggie. You got to have disposable gloves on to keep the sample clean. And then we transport it to the tube, put it in the tube, and send it on to Iowa State. And then Iowa State comes back to the vet with their report. The vet comes to us with the results. Now, I want to say that rope test also is good for PDV, Circo. I don't think it'll do Myco. I know it does Circo. And there's there's a couple others that'll do. I just can't put my finger on what those are, because that's the primary ones that we test for. I would encourage everybody that's running any kind of numbers to do the rope test at least once a year on a regular basis. It's really informative. If you've got scours, the sampling is so simple. There's so many times when you've got an issue, you don't have to post the pig, take samples. You can do the rope test. If you're testing for scours, we do a lot of that. If we have an issue, you take a sample of the manure, you get it with your baggie, you send that baggie on to Iowa State. They come back and tell you what you're dealing with. Are you dealing with an E. coli scour? Are you dealing with PDV scour? When we farrowed on another farm that we had E. coli and we had Clostridium. And we vaccinated for everything. And now we don't have to, because we moved to a new area. And I guess don't go crazy on vaccinations if you don't need to. Just make sure you know what your problem is before you start giving shots. So
can I add something?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had an issue. I lost one entire litter and 4 of another litter due to E. coli, which I didn't know that that's what the problem was. But if you do have a state vet that is near you, if you take one of those dead piglets and to them and let them necropsy them, and you, like, I don't know how it is in other states, but like in the state of Virginia, if you have more than 4 deaths or 4 dead piglets, then they will either do the necropsy for free or they charge a half price on what the necropsy is. And I went to the state vet and they charged me $50 for the necropsy. And then I also sent tissue samples to Cornell and Iowa as well. So that is another thing that people can look into, is if you're having those issues and you don't have a vet, like a regular vet that works on them, state vets will accept those samples, and you can actually call them and ask them what samples you want to send in, or they'll tell you what samples of that piglet to send in. Part of the just an idea.
You cut out on us a little bit, Molly.
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay. I was just saying that you can contact your state vet. They will help you out a lot if you're having issues.
Anybody else?
I would just say that varies state to state. I have my state vet here every year. I volunteer for every program they offer. Pseudo-rabies, I forgot what the other one was. He's here every year. I called him when I had this issue. He told me here in New York, you got to deal through your local vet, and we dealt with Cornell. Cornell is very expensive, and I like dealing with 4-Star and Iowa State. I think for my testing, it was both tests. I got to say they were under $100 each, and I'd been sending pigs to Cornell for necropsies that were, like I said, $800. That's a lot of piglets, especially when you got piglets dying and you don't have piglets to sell. So,
Yes.
With a vet is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're in an area where you're not dealing with hog vets and that kind of thing, Iowa State, K-State, Purdue, Cornell are the 4 colleges that I know that are pretty much focused on hog production and testing and such. K-State is excellent for nutrition. They have a department. They actually make a K-State premix. if you have any kind of questions with regard to nutrition, that K-State is just outstanding for that. Just a tip.
Is that Kentucky? Who's K-State? Kentucky?
No, I'm sorry, K-State, Kansas State.
Kansas State. Okay, that makes sense.
Yep. Yep. Sorry, I did. Yeah, Midwest. So, Walt, I don't think I've ever met our state vets. Have you?
I've never had a real reason to be honest. You know,
I've never
crossed
met
my
a state
fingers,
vet.
things have gone well. So
Yeah. And I've still got a lot of old time vets around here that, that are in their 60s and late 50s, and they dealt with a lot of hog clients for a lot of years. So there's still some hands-on vets here that at least have been around hogs and don't have a problem dealing with them. So that helps. Okay,
Yeah,
so let's go on. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that what I found around here, where I'm at, there's a lot more cattle than there are hogs, and the hogs that are here in this area are all in confinement, and they have their own vets, and the
Right.
other vets in the area don't really want to mess with pigs. So,
Well, yeah, just about every integrator in every confinement situation, they've got their own vets and do their own thing, and yeah, and they don't do anything for anybody else.
right.
So, all right, so let's go ahead and move on. So I get a lot of calls, messages about farrowing and problems with farrowing. I guess I'd like to know from everybody, let's talk about your prep for upcoming farrowings, your maybe medicines you keep on hand, how you farrow, how you bring them up on feed. Let's talk about that, because I'll tell you, the biggest thing that I get from people is mastitis, various weights on the pigs when they're born, starve outs. Those are the kinds of questions that I hear from people. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's working for people. Just about everybody here has really got along good. So let's talk about what works.
Well, I'll tell you in the beginning, all of my hogs were on free choice. And through part of our discussions and learning, I realized the importance of hand feeding the sows and gilts. And it's starting to show up in the litters with even weights. I don't have a really big one and a really small one. So that's worked for me. As far as my feed program, I have a special blend with my mill that's about 16% protein. And then shortly before they're farrowing, I start doing a half ration of the 16%. And then I think the lactation is 23%. So I start mixing it. When they farrow, it's just water the first day. I think that was part of your advice, or maybe a half ration. And then, slowly building them back up. And then when I wean them, same thing. When I wean them the first day, it's all just water. I think that's what it is. I got to go look at my notes, but it's based on conversations you and I have had. It's not how I used to do it. It just used to be free choice. And I never had mastitis. As far as farrowing, I've never had prolapse or any of those issues. I show up in the barn, especially now it's 3 miles away. They farrow and I show up and there's piglets. Down here, I was making tracks to the barn every time they were close. But, I have never had a stuck piglet or any of that stuff.
So I had a guy this fall that called me, and he was having issues, and he had lost a couple litters of pigs and sent me a bunch of pictures of his sows, and they had mastitis. It was very obvious. And as we started talking, I said, walk me through how you start your hogs when they farrow. And day one, as soon as they got done farrowing, he was throwing a bag of feed that he was buying at the feed store over for the sow in a 50-pound pile of feed. And she was starting off with that, eating all she wanted to eat. and that just does not work. And they had mastitis. The sows wouldn't milk. They lost all their pigs. They were angry. The ones that they didn't lose, she ate, just because she was miserable. So how about everybody else? How do you?
So I have a question on the feed thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Russ.
10 times they don't even get up to eat it until 12 to 18 hours later. So is that weird? Because do I need to worry about the mastitis then and switch to water? They tend to just really slowly get back on feed, and they don't really devour everything even.
So let me ask you this, Russ. How much feed are you giving them per day the last few weeks before they farrow?
So I watch their condition, and I'll kind of, depending on the sow, more or less, but I'd say anywhere between the 4-pound mark, pretty typically wet feed.
And how even are your pigs when they're born?
Pretty much all the same size. Once in a while, if I have like 18 or 16 in the litter, the last couple will be really small. You're not really, but runty, it's always those last 1 or 2 or 3.
Usually I've got sows that'll get up and drink. They might eat a little bit of feed, but I don't give them a lot of feed the first day anyway. I give them enough to make them think that they had a little nibble, and that's it. And then I start working them up from there, and it takes me a week, 10 days to get them to where they need to be on feed. You're better off to not rush them. And then once they get to that point, I give them all they want to eat. The pigs are going to eat too. They're going to start eating. I see a lot of posts where, people have pigs that are eating at a week or 2 old. And is that okay? Well, yeah, it's okay. It's great. Get those pigs eating. And,
Okay.
the more they eat, the less stress they put on mom. So, but I also wean a lot sooner than a lot of people do. So, and then when I'm kind of like what Matt does, I shut them off the day that I wean. And then I bring them back, flush them with 7 or 8 pounds of feed a day. They come in heat second or third day after they farrow like clockwork, and then go from there. And I don't overfeed them in gestation, 4 to 5 pounds a day, depending on what kind of condition they're in. I try to keep a few medicines around just in case I need it. I always keep a bottle of oxytocin. I always keep a bottle of B12 and a bottle of penicillin if the sow starts to show that she has infection. I do not give shots to sows unless they show me something. If a sow's having trouble pigging, if she's a gilt and restless or something like that, a couple cc's of oxytocin is all natural. It's a natural hormone. I never give more than 2 cc's, and I've never had to. The B12 is if a sow goes off feed, a couple cc's of B12 stimulates appetite. Very, very seldom do I ever have to use that. And I never use penicillin unless I absolutely have to. And that's if she's showing that she has some infection, and that's very obvious from her vulva that she'll be passing infection. That rarely ever happens. But it's the thing is, if you don't have it on hand, that's when you're going to need it. And it'll be the middle of the night on a Saturday. So that's why I keep that stuff on hand. Keith, I know you really have tried to put together a list of things for farrowing season. You want to kind of talk about that?
I basically have a full out medical bag with like everything in it. And then I have my medicines, you know, in the fridge. And then when I go out to Farrow, I usually grab the oxytocin, penicillin, and take that out there to put on the table. But I got the gloves, lube, iodine, like everything out there. And then I actually just got done taking the cabinet down out of that milking parlor, and I'm redoing that to put right there by the farrowing stalls, so I can put all that stuff in there. And we just got a new refrigerator and stuff, so actually I'm moving the old refrigerator out there so I can put the medicines in there. And then I'm making a drop down table so I can fold it up against the that back fence out there and then fold it down when we're out there. And as far as feed goes, I just go off of how the sows look, and it's usually right at about 5 pounds. And then this year I really started pushing them on third cutting alfalfa, and I'm planning on sticking with that all the way through and keeping records on it. I want to see how they really do on that, including all the way through after they farrow, and just keep on throwing it to them. And then usually I'm bumping it up to about 8 pounds or so, right up till they get ready to go into the stalls. And I try to get them into the farrowing stalls about 10 days prior to their farrowing date. And then I'm usually leaving them on about 8 pounds of feed a day. As long as they're not looking heavy, I just kind of go off of how they're looking, really. And then usually all my piglets are, well, you guys have seen how the piglets look. They're usually all about the same size. And then usually right after she farrows, I actually have this mix of, it's called like something other punch, but it has like all these vitamins and nutrients and stuff in it. And I'll get about 4 pounds of feed, and I dump some of that in there with it, and then some water and stuff, and then just soak the feed, and then dump that in there with them. And all the sows usually just eat that right up after they farrow. After usually, you know, they nurse for quite a while and stuff, but then they usually, I've never had a problem with them eating after that. Usually they stick with about 4 or 5, 6 pounds all the way through. And then I don't know, I've always seen mine of usually the piglets usually try to start eating whatever's on the floor usually within a couple days after they're born. And then I'll try to start throwing feed back in their creep area back there to them. Because usually by like a time they're like a day old or whatever, I know Shelly, she thought it was just hilarious that the piglets would clean all the dirt out of the cracks in the floor and stuff. Because I would open up the door by the time they're a day or 2 old and let the sow out to get a little bit of exercise. I'd let her out there in the barn area that go around, and the piglets would start cleaning the daggone cracks out of the floor. And hell, by the time they're like a week old, the whole barn floor is cleaned up by those little piglets and stuff sticking their nose down in the cracks. But I just couldn't get over with my first litter how fastly this heritage breed of hogs, you know, the piglets, it's like they know to start rooting for food and stuff, and how fast they're trying to get on the food and stuff. I was always pretty impressed with it. As far as issues, I think everybody knows I lost a sow, but I could not find a vet early on. And then after we lost that sow, we're pretty sure she hemorrhaged. But I did find a dedicated hog vet here, actually within about 20 minutes of our house. And he can do surgeries, like all kinds of stuff. So I'm pretty well set now. So,
Joe, you want to talk a little bit about how you start sows farrowing and bring them through?
Yeah, I can. I wanted to kind of touch back on what you were talking about with the feed when you say how you the first day you don't give them anything and you slowly bring them up in a week or so. What's the reason behind that? Why don't you just let them have 5 pounds right away and then just keep upping them as they?
I have never done that. When you do that, we've had issues in the past, not with red wattles, but in the past with sows that would go off the feed. You pushed them too hard, too fast. They started milking too fast, and you essentially ended up with milk fever type scenarios in your sows, just like you would with a milk cow. You do the same exact thing when you're milking cows. You bring them up on feed slowly after they calve. You don't start them out day one. They go off feed. They get mastitis. You got to build them up.
It's for the
I've
milk
just
quality, essentially.
always done that from the very beginning of when I was a kid and my dad was raising hogs. That's the way it was always preached. That's the way we always did it. I know the big confinement units do the exact same thing. They track their feed on a graph. They bring them up. They get them to full feed within a week. They produce milk for the pigs like they're dairy cows. They shut them off the feed. They go down on milk. They wean the pigs, and they come right back in heat and breed. I'll add this too. Keith, you're feeding alfalfa hay. So a laxative in constipation is a big thing in a sow for hurting, for mastitis, or just limiting milk production to the pigs. Big deal, okay? A lot of people with red wattles don't necessarily have that problem because they've either got a bale of hay in the lot or they've got them out on pasture. So they're getting some roughage. If you're on cement or in a lot and they don't have access to that, alfalfa hay for a week before they farrow and a week after they farrow is outstanding to act as a laxative so that sow doesn't get constipated and she doesn't, she's not miserable, so she really starts milking. So yeah,
How about
strictly by
alfalfa?
accident, that's great.
How about alfalfa mixed in the feed? Because I mix bales right in the ration.
Absolutely works fantastic, Joe. We have too. We put in a bigger screen when we do the alfalfa, and then we pop in our smaller grain feed, our smaller screen for corn and such.
So I just leave the small screen and I use that for the alfalfa.
I wouldn't see why it would.
It goes through fine, so I figured, because then the feed, it depends on how much hay I put in. It's kind of got a little neon tint to it. It doesn't, you can't even hardly see the alfalfa in it. It just
Right.
changes the color.
That's a fantastic roughage for sows. Any way to get those into sows is just fantastic.
Do you have any idea of how much per ton, like on a sow ration?
Yeah, so when we were building rations, I worked for Mormons for a long time, and we built a lot of rations, and we would mix 200 pounds of alfalfa hay, or we sold a 50-pound bag of this laxative product, and that's what we would mix in per ton.
Is that like at a 17% or 18?
I'm sorry, what was 17 or 18?
Protein on that on that ration?
Yeah, it was. I want to say it was 18% with the higher vitamins and minerals for the sows.
Is that balanced before or after the alfalfa? Are you using 18% protein feed plus the alfalfa, or is it balanced at a
Balanced
complete
with it.
18?
That would have been balanced with it when we were putting it in the feed.
Okay.
It was always the end product.
You guys
The
making
big
your own
problem-
feed,
Joe, I can answer your question a little better on the protein. We never built rations based on protein, okay?
Yep.
Every ration that we ever built was based on lysine. And there was always 3 limiting amino acids, and it was lysine, methionine, and tryptophan. There was never a ration that we ever built that was based on protein. Because protein is a fake, just so you know, protein is a fake answer for making feed for hogs. Because different feedstuffs can have a high level of protein, but they don't have a high level of digestibility. So everything was built off of a lysine level because that was always the main limiting amino acid to build rations. So
So if
we
you're
always,
like,
we always built a sow ration for lactation that was 1.1 to 1.2% lysine.
I think that lysine is, a lot of people, we don't talk about it enough. It was one of the things that I was lucky enough early on to stumble across. And when I was building my custom blend, starting with their base, I mean, we were at 0.04. And the more reading I did, the more you found out for, sow production, the rest, how important lysine really was. And 0.04, definitely not enough. So we worked on a ration build. I actually have to add it into my feed to get me to 1.1.
We always try to be 1.1 to 1.2 lysine for a sow ration for lactation, and we always try to be 0.6 to 0.7 during gestation. And then add the necessary sow vitamin packs to the ration to cover the vitamins and minerals needed.
So also, like you and Joe, you guys have the benefit of making your own feed on site, where you guys are putting your alfalfa and stuff right in there. Me, I have to have mine added in as part of my, so I have corn, alfalfa meal, and some other stuff as part of my pellet program, but also then adding it in either baleage and or dry hay when they're in pens.
We're unique in the fact out here that we grind our own feed, or we've got multiple, at least I do, maybe I think Joe does too, Walt does also. We have feed mills all around us that will either grind feed for us, or we can take corn in and grain bank it. They'll build the rations from our grain bank. We've got a lot of options from that standpoint that maybe aren't necessarily available in other parts of the country.
I agree. I'm curious what you guys are paying per ton. We're up to about $600 a ton here.
Well, I book my bean mill and I buy my premix, and our corn comes out of the bin.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time since I booked my bean mill, and it's been a long time since I even figured what it costs.
I do the same thing.
You do the same thing, Joe?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, our corn that's grown is, we don't buy any commercial fertilizer. It's all manure fertilized. We haven't bought any of that in 13 years. So our cost of production on our corn is quite a bit different than a lot of scenarios other places.
When I figured corn in, it's whatever I can get at the ethanol plant, or I can get it the elevators, $6.50 a bushel is what I figure,
right,
is what I can get for it to sell it. And I can't remember soybean meal. I get that 2 tons at a time. I can't remember the last time I bought it, where it was at per pound.
You want to go ahead and talk about how you do your farrowing, Joe? Your huts and your inside the shed have been a big hit. I know that.
Yep, I can. I keep all the sows. They're in an outside lot, open lot. It's all cement and a building to go in. I just feed them gestation ration out there. I keep the boar rate with them. When I start seeing something bagging up, as long as I got room, that's the other thing, is they all like to pig at the same time, it seems like, and I don't have enough huts, but so I'm shuffling things around. But as soon as I see one start bagging, I'll bring it in, put it in a hut. And then from Mark's advice, bump their feet up a little bit to try to get the piglets a little bigger, more uniform in size. For hopefully a couple weeks, I can keep them in there until they pig in those huts. And ideally 2 weeks, and it depends on the weather too. If I'm below zero, at least 2 to 3 weeks, I just soon keep them in the huts. Otherwise, once, after, how they are, after 3, 4, or 5 days, they're rocking and rolling. If it's warm enough out, I'll get them out and get them in an open pen with deep bedding. I'm processing before I get them out of the huts and mixing with anything, going through and notching ears. Yeah, and then I got different pens where I'll start putting multiple sows together in groups. And then once they're on eating good and drinking, they're on a full feed stuffer. The sows are. And then trying to wean at 6 weeks, 7 maybe. But those huts have been, because a little backstory, I'm a beef farmer, and these pigs are, 6, 7 years ago is when I got into these. So I had no idea. And I go on the internet and, oh yeah, you can do it outside. It can be 10 below and this and that. And I learned real quick in Minnesota, it doesn't work very well. So those huts, you put the heat lamps in there. Between the sow and that heat lamp, I can be 20 below zero, and it's probably 60, 70 degrees in that hut. I mean, it's beautiful for that pig, for pigging.
So Joe, talk a little bit about the supplies needed, because you and I talked about that. The supplies that you need to build one of those huts and kind of what you got. I know cost varies, but I think you kind of have an idea on that.
Last winter when I built the last 3. If I remember right, I was a little over $300 a piece. But it would probably be a little more. I've got 2x6s laying around. I've tore down a few corn cribs. So, I've got lumber laying around. The only thing I really had to buy was the screws. And then the plywood, which was horrible last winter. They were $45 a sheet. So, and I messed up. I should have spent the extra 10 or 15 and got the 5/8. I got the 1/2 inch, and I just used more 2x6s to brace it up more, but I wish I would have went a little heavier.
And how many sheets per hut?
It'll take 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6.5 per hut.
And
on the floor, you got to split one because it's 6 feet wide. So it's a full 1.5 sheets.
Okay. And what did you use for the cover for the door entrance?
For the entrance, I round baler belting.
And has that held up good with the sows?
Yeah, perfect. They don't touch that. They can't rip it. They can't do nothing to it.
Good.
That's heavy enough. I did use I had some conveyor belting off an old bunk feeder, and I tried it's thinner, and I thought it would work. I put it on the first couple, and they started nesting, and they tore it to shreds.
And
so it's got to be thick enough.
And on your huts, what's the maximum size you think you can be okay with on the size of a sow?
Oh, I've got a couple of those girls I know they got to be pushing 6, and they're just fine.
Good.
The only issue I have is that I have one Berkshire still, and she's built different. They've got shoulders on them and they're wide, really wide in the shoulders. And she really has to push at 19 and a half or 20 inches wide. And she's 6 years old, so she's getting pretty good size now. But this last time I put her in, it took her a day before she finally would push hard enough to get through that door. And then once she figured that out, she was going through. But yeah, that was the only issue I've had. So maybe I would, if you've got like a Berkshire or that type of hog with big shoulders, big wide shoulders, I'd maybe go a little wider on the door, a couple inches. But the red wattles, they're a little taller. They don't have the shoulders like that, so they're just fine.
Right. Matt, how's your shed working out so far?
It's filling up fast. It's I'm really happy with it. That 23 below zero night I was away. The one gilt farrowed about 30 hours before. There's plenty of straw. She did fine. I came back. I hung one of my cow glow. Got a couple more ready to go. So I think the big thing is dry straw out of the wind. As long as they're with mom, they seem to be doing okay. But I'll add the cow glow units, and I have enough others coming that I need to move. I need to move them out into farrowing huts, and I ordered and paid for 2 of those, the European style porta huts. So that's my next thing, is I got those lined up to take them out of the farrowing barn and get them into there on electric mesh fence where they can all just kind of commingle.
Are
And
you
I can
using
bring them back.
porta huts, Matt?
What's that?
Are they metal porta huts?
They are. Yeah, we've talked about them, but I really needed something. I've looked at calf hutches as well. So I got 2 of the metal porta huts, the European style with the sliding door. And I got one that I'm in the process of building. And that's, that's going to be, it's not going to have a floor, and it's going to be just something I can drag, 8 foot by 8 foot, 4 foot sidewalls.
Right. So let's talk about bedding during farrowing. I'm curious what everybody's thoughts are, and how much is too much? How deep should the bedding be? How deep should the straw be? At what point do you start losing pigs because they get lost in the bedding? What's everybody's thoughts on that?
I know with my them huts, a little less is more. Maybe 3-4 squares, just so to keep the floor nice and dry, and just a layer of straw, just to keep it dry, and because it's already warm in there, they don't need the bedding for warmth. So, and it's up off the ground, it's dry. So I know in that situation, that's what I found is best.
What's everybody else think?
One of the things that I found with the heat, the artificial heat of the cow glow units, originally when my stalls down in this, the barn in the house that I've been at for the last 20 years, my stalls down there are 10 by 10, and I hung the heat parallel to the back wall, and it heated up the back wall. So the sow would love to lay against the back wall because it was warm. And that certainly increased, it increased my crush factor. Once I put the heating unit diagonal, she laid in the middle of the room, that reduced it, but I also had to reduce my bedding. So in the new place up there that I'm doing, I actually bed about 4 inches of shavings before I put straw on top. So when she's urinating and stuff out front, I can clean that up. But if there's fluids and things, the shavings are sucking that up instead of the straw. And then I just keep moving stuff out. I move it from front to back. So my fresh stuff goes in the front. I just keep moving towards the back of the pen and then out. So, and I try to do a weekly cleaning. Sometimes it doesn't always happen.
So before I had heat lamps, my first farrowing was in mid-December, and it was super cold. And I decided to put a shit ton of hay and straw in there. And she dug it all up in one big pile. And then I lost 4 to basically, they got underneath it and they smothered, she laid on them. So what I changed to is I now have heat lamps, but I have dirt flooring. And so I put in some fresh dirt, and then I put about 200 pounds of pellets, sawdust pellets down. And then I put about 3 bags of shavings, and I'll leave it like that for the first 4 days. And then I will add straw on top of that. But I don't use straw or anything like that in the cold months until like a week or so in, to keep them from piling it up.
Anybody else want to interject?
I put basically some sawdust down on the floor, and then I put the bigger wood chips on top of that, and then I put probably about a half bale maybe in there, and then I'm continually putting new in and cleaning old out and totally cleaning it out. But so far, like Lily and Ginger both have been like very anal about how they're laying down in there. You know, like they sit there and call out, you know, their piglets that they're laying down. And if they're not totally out of the way when they're starting to lay down, they get back up and walk around until they're totally out of the way. And I've seen them take 6-7 times before they'll lay down in there. So I haven't had any problem with any of them getting laid on yet, because they've all been like so careful about laying down with their piglets in there.
So here's the question. Do people, like I heard Joe say he throws 3 or 4 leaves in, do you spread it for them, or do you let them do all the spreading themselves?
Depends
I
on
put-
if I have time.
put some of it in there. I spread some of it, and then some I just throw in there, and then they do their little nesting thing. But sometimes even what I spread around, they take it and do their thing with it.
Right, because you did it wrong.
Yeah. Even if they take it and put it back in the same place where I already had it, they got to do their thing with it.
Well, it was their idea that way.
You know, and they'll take it and chew it up and then move it over in one place. And I know they like sitting there chewing on it, and then they'll shake it and nose it around and make their little nest how they want it. And they'll move it from day to day. And one day it'll be over here, and the next day it's over here. And I don't know, they just do their own thing with it. Especially Lily she was just, I mean, just incredible. I mean, even when she was farrowing, she knew exactly where each one of her babies was. And as she was sitting there trying to push, she would not move her body where each one of her babies was at, nursing on her. And she had one behind her, I remember, and she was just so careful. I just couldn't get over it. And here she was like a runt, and I was going to send her off the market, and Shelly liked her, so we decided to keep her. And she was probably the best sow I've ever seen in my life. She was just pretty amazing.
I want to add that with the bedding, when I was trying to farrow in the winter more in open sheds, I mean, temperature was a direct correlation. When it got really, really cold, those sows were just uncomfortable, and they kept getting up. They'd reposition, they'd get up, reposition, and that's where I'd get a lot of the crushing them. Just because of the sow was uncomfortable, what I could see. She's just continuously moving around, trying to find the warmer spot or position the straw, you know, if you have a lot of straw there.
So what temperature is your barn typically then? Because like mine are all just out in the open. And I mean, I do that first week I do like, cause I have a lot of wood chips all the time from the tree services. So I'll have like a foot of wood chips and a bit of straw down, and that's about it. I mean, I don't have a heated barn or anything, but my typical temperature, like 40 to 50 degrees inside, unless it's like 10 degrees, in which case I got a little tiny blower and it'll stay about 35. But like, I don't use heat lamps or any of that because I had issues, and then they're just out in the open. But like, it looks like you have, I think I'm thinking of the correct post, but it was like huts inside of a barn.
The barn is
Right.
not heated. It's just.
Yeah, mine isn't either.
No, just the
I'm
huts are
just-
heated with heat lamps is all.
Yeah, but so what temperature is your like barn temperature at that you're finding that you need to use like a hut inside as well?
My huts were full here and I had a sow that was really close. So I had an open lot or open pen in that barn. And I believe it got down to 15 the other night when she farrowed, and she did fine.
Oh, it gets real cold then. Okay, yeah. 'Cause
Anything,
I'm further
anything
south
in-
than you too.
anything in the teens, 20 and up, I found I don't have too much of an issue. Once we get in the teens or single digits below 0, then it starts.
Hello.
That's what
Sorry,
I
mine froze.
Yeah, we're upstate New York here, and this year is mild, but we're below 0 most nights. But when last couple of years, we'll go 2 weeks at a time where it's 20 below at night and doesn't get above 0 in the day. And you got to have a barn and you got to have heat if you expect to be successful.
No, that makes total sense. You guys,
Yep.
sounds like your barns run about 30 degrees colder than mine. Just with the climates you're in.
Well,
was-
my barn is whatever the outside temperature is, plus, the sow's heat. But really,
Mhm.
my cow glow heaters are just, they're heating objects. They don't heat the air. It's just basically radiant heat. It's not heating
Mhm.
the air. So you go in the barn, it's 20 below 0, but underneath the heat lamp, it's 90 degrees. The cow glow radiant heaters, it's 90 where the piglets are.
Mhm.
So Matt, I have a question for you on your heaters. Okay. So let's say for whatever reason, that radiant heat, the chain breaks, the sow pulls it down, it ends up in the straw. Is it setting the straw on fire? I can't hear you.
Your mute's on, Matt.
Sorry, guys. It is, Mark. So the CalGlow units that I use, it's basically a steel bar with electric running through it. It's just hot red and it radiates it down. The thing that I like about them, and I had a barn fire with the red lamp. The sow piled the hay up enough that it actually caught that on fire. These CalGlow units are no less than 5 feet off the ground. So they're 5 feet up above where they really can't get. And when I poured, like in the new barn where I sectioned it off where the piglets they're the only one that have access to it, the sow can't even get to it. And so they are on chains. They're on eye hooks that are, open eye hooks that are screwed in about 1.5 inches.
Okay.
So the risk to me is a lot less. Because with those red heaters, you got to get them down, 3 foot.
Right.
You
I've
know,
always
so-
asked you that and I just never have.
Well, one of the CalGlow, like my in the barn I'm at here, it's hardwired. It's 220. That's almost 6 feet off the ground to have 90 degree temperature, surface temperature. That's a
Right.
4 foot unit. So
What's it cost to get one of them? I mean, what's the cost on them, if you don't mind?
CalGlow units are really not that expensive. Like I have one up in this barn that's 30 inches. I can move it pen to pen to pen. It's under $200. It's a plug-in unit. You just move it around. the first one that I got that was 220 and was hardwired, and I can also set the temperature on it, so it doesn't have to be full throttle. It'll come on and off. That was probably like 215, 220. You know, they might have gone up now. I've looked at them recently, but they are not. I mean, infrared technology, radiant technology has come a long ways in the last 3 years. It's unbelievable with the amount of technology out there. We just in Hilton Head went to a bar. It's 50 degrees outside, and you look up, and there's radiant technology over the top of you when you're ordering your drink to keep you warm. You know, so it's come a long ways. After the barn fire, I swore I'd never have a red light again. The insurance adjuster came here. He said, "Well, I'm sorry about your barn fire. This is the 8th barn fire due to red lights this month."
Wow.
You know, it's high risk.
How about electrical usage?
I just want to circle back 1 second on medication. Mark, one of the best things you ever told me was to get a bottle of the neomycin. And you know, when I was trying to figure out what I had, I can't tell you how many piglets I saved once they started with the sneeze, the cough, the diarrhea, by giving them the neomycin. It's one of the cheapest medications that I keep on hand.
I wanted to touch on that too, if you don't mind, Mark. What's the dosage on that? Because I just got some through my vet, and I wasn't real sure on how you're administering it or the dosage.
For me, it's oral. I put it into a CC syringe, pick the piglet up, and I'd have to look at it. But I think it's for a piglet, I think it was a half a cc for up to 20 pounds. And I talked to my vet. He said, "Hey, listen, if it's a quarter and you're giving them a half, it's still fine." But it was oral, so I'd pick the piglets up, put it in the corner of their mouth, and they would orally take it. Not with a needle, just a syringe without the needle.
Are we talking the same? Because what I got was a powder.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Okay.
Matt mixes it up with water and either those. Matt, you did it always in the mouth, right?
Yeah, it's a big bottle, and it was diluted to give orally is what my vet gave me. So I just pour it in like a little shot glass and then take it out and give it to each piglet.
And usually those neomycin packets on the back have the mixing rates in a stock solution.
Yeah.
A bag per 200 gallon or something like that. I without looking, I don't know what it is, but
Because I just got the 2.5 gallon pan, rubber pans that I was just gonna try to do a group like that group that I showed you the other day.
yeah.
What's in that group? 20 of them. So I wasn't sure if it's a tablespoon per 5 gallons or what.
Literally, that's all it takes.
Really. Yep.
Yep. My issue was I didn't know. I wanted to make sure each piglet was getting the proper dosage, because usually it was just one group at a time. So maybe it's 7 to 9 piglets, and they weren't going to drink 2 gallons of water. And my issue always popped up at 3 weeks.
Right.
So that's why I was orally dosing them.
Right. Whenever we've seen it in the past, it's been at that 3-week range to about 5 weeks is about the oldest I've ever seen it.
And that's with the sow or after weaning?
Both.
Oh.
Mine was with the sow. So what I was fighting, what it ended up being was parvo. And so, I would have, let's say I had 12 in a litter, I lost 4, and the placenta was kind of brown, and most of the piglets looked okay. But at 3 weeks, I'd go down there and they would start with a sneeze, and I knew I was in trouble. Started with a sneeze, and then it was a cough, and then it was the yellow diarrhea. And until Mark told me about once I started the neomycin, it just cleaned everything up. It probably literally saved 30 piglets, 40 piglets in a year.
Anybody else?
What ages are you seeing this at?
I've always seen it 3 weeks to 5 weeks. Matt, what was
But
yours?
then after that, you're in the clear pretty much, or?
E. coli is more of a young pig kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mine was 3 weeks, Mark. It was always just right at 3 weeks. You know, you're going down there every day, checking on them. And as soon as you hear that sneeze, you got to be paying attention. I just figured, oh, okay, they just got to sneeze. And literally, you know, within 2 days, piglets are dropping dead. You know, because they're dehydrated. You know, they got the scours, they got everything else, and they're dehydrated and they're done. And once they're dehydrated, I've tried the underskin sticks with saline solutions. It's nearly impossible getting them back.
Anybody else? So before we leave, I need to change directions a minute. I just need to kind of see where everybody's at on this. So my question is, everybody's getting ready to farrow or farrowing now. You got your plans for this year. Now, I'm not talking about breeding stock sales. I'm talking about the animals that aren't qualified and aren't going to get sold as breeding stock. Do you have a good market for those animals? Are you looking for a market for those animals? Do you sell as feeder pigs or older? And then the last question that I'd like to know is, if you had a better market, would you increase your production? And you just have held back because of your lack of market. So if I could get you guys to input on this, I'd really appreciate it.
I would say I've had a good market. We sell a lot of pork through the farmer's market, and usually can move quite a bit that way. And then also whole and half hogs. But the biggest issue I'm having is finding a processor. You know, that's getting harder and harder to find somebody to, you know, be able to get the hogs in. They're all booking up a year in advance, and it's a real issue for us.
Matt? You're muted, Matt.
I went to 5 different processors, settled on 2 within a 2-hour radius. I cannot make enough hogs for meat. I'm selling retail, I'm selling halves and wholes. I have people that want, you know, feeder piglets. But really the way that I'm headed is more meat production, because it's where the money is. I can sell, you know, feeder piglets at $250 a piece. And if you have a litter of 7, you know, that's a couple tons of grain. Whereas if I feed them out, you know, my profit's more than double. So when I'm selling feeder pigs at halves and wholes, my profit is between $500 and $600 a hog, as opposed to, you know, if I'm selling a piglet at $250.
Keith?
What's that?
Oh, I was Keith Clinker.
If I could ever get healthy enough, I would like to get bigger, but I don't know. I'm looking at back surgery and then another surgery after that, and then probably getting my hips replaced after that. So I don't know.
You'll be bionic. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I wish I could just get a robotic body and just go from there. So
Joe?
Yeah, I can't raise enough of them. I get emails daily, especially this time of year for spring feeder pigs. I'm trying to sell all 4 different ways: feeder pigs, breeding stock, the good stuff that's good enough for breeding. We do the wholes and halves and retail. So yeah, I can't raise enough. I know that.
Are you going to increase some, Joe?
I'd like to, but it's just time and space.
Right.
You know, building more huts. I'd almost be better off building a farrowing shed or something, you know, instead of those huts. But
Right.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm at about 20 sows right now, and that's kind of max with my facility.
Right. Russ?
So last year I fed out around 300 hogs between the red wattles and the mangalisas. Kind of getting sick of dealing with retail customers. I have no interest in doing farmers markets like other people do, because it's kind of like my hobby business. I'm moving more into selling all feeders. I don't sell any breeders typically to anybody. The price they go for is not worth it. So, for instance, I get twice the price of what people are willing to pay for red wattle breeding stock for unregistered mangalisas. So I sell mangalisa breeding stock, but not red wattle breeding stock. I'm keeping my wholesale account. Like I sell to a company that sells a lot of Wagyu and stuff online, and the small like grocery stores. I hadn't been doing wholes and halves, but I started to last fall. I may do that, but my preference has been I've had a lot of Asians, Europeans, and South Americans that come here, and I'll kill the hog and they'll gut it and do their thing and take it on, and saves me the trip to the processor and all the money that goes into processing and holding meat and stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at. I probably have now, if I'm knocking out, because if I don't do 300 feeders, I'll probably move up to maybe 30 sows total or something like that. Pretty
Right.
much all my feeder piglets for the whole year are gone, whatever I can produce.
How are you? What price by the pound were you selling your wholes and halves?
So my processor that I have does they don't have a scalder, they skin, and most of the cuts they want are skinned anyways. And so I was doing on the red wattle $3.50 a pound hanging plus processing. And then on my mangalisa, I get typically like $5.50, $6 a pound plus processing, but that's with the fat still on. That's not with them taking the fat and whatnot off.
Right.
So
Right.
that's kind of the price I can get. I mean, I do get more retail, like that $9 to $12 range on some cuts, but it's a lot of effort getting all the cuts done and holding them. And I don't know, I'm a little bit over people. So like I would rather just deal with my wholesale customers, and then like the ethnic people that come out to the farm are really, really easy to deal with, and they pay whatever I ask, and they're just happy that someone will let them do it. So
So I
yeah, I don't know. That's how I'm kind of going.
I can relate to the whole Asian at the farm. We've got a JBS packing plant that's about 20 miles from where I live. And of course, there's a lot of Asians that work there. And they started coming out because my wife was, selling chickens and all of that stuff and goats and all that stuff. And they were buying that. And then they started buying the red wattles. And I'd have 10, 15 vehicles pull in on a Saturday morning, every one of them pockets full of cash, and
Exactly. And they're willing to pay.
They bring families. I mean, the kids, the wife, they were all smiling. They're all friendly every single time.
And they send 3 friends your way. You don't even have to advertise. They send 3 more people your way. And all of a sudden, I wake up on a Saturday morning at 6 a.m. and there's cars in the driveway, and I got to go try to kill an animal for them or whatever.
You euthanize it. They clean it. 4 guys will each grab a leg, throw it in the back of the pickup, and then back the next pickup in.
Are you weighing them? Or how you
strictly live.
I just do the measurement.
Okay.
Don't even worry about it. I literally can. I've done so many fat hogs. I can literally guess a hog within 10 pounds. No problem in that.
No.
Anywhere from 260 to about.
That clientele's not hard on the number either. As long as they think you're being fair and it's close, they're fine.
Yep, they do not care. They're just happy that you're treating them like they should be treated. So they are great people to work with.
So how do I get into that kind of market clientele?
You gotta
The
move
retail-
next to the packing plant.
No,
The
well, the
retail might be-
Europeans are really
here.
good. I have Europeans that come all the way from like northern central Indiana. So they'll drive 2.5 hours. I have some people that come from up by Minnesota by you. They come from a few hours away once they know.
Where are you at? Ian? I can't remember.
What facility? I'm sorry, Joe. What kind of facility do you have for them to butcher them there? You know, to euthanize them, dispatch them, and do what they got to do.
Yeah.
And then
so
how much per pound? Line?
I use a Blitz bolt gun, and it's right between their eyes, ears, make an X right there. And then they got them. I have a tractor that's sitting there with a bucket. They throw everything in the bucket, and I compost everything. And that works really, really well because I've got sawmills close by, and so I have access to that type of sawdust, and we compost using sawdust.
Yeah.
And how much per pound live weight? We're about $2 a pound.
I usually sell a live hog for $350 to $450, depending on the price of corn. And
That's
What's
around a
the-
300 pounder. Or?
yeah, 280, 300.
So I'm $2.50 a pound live weight on my red wattles. The Asians buy them smaller. The Hispanics buy them smaller, like 120 to 150 pounds. And then the Europeans want them jumbo, like 350 to 450.
And I couldn't do the price I do. I can't get the price any higher than that where I'm at, but I also couldn't do that price if I was paying $500-600 a ton for feed. I just couldn't do it. Big difference.
I'm about the same range as you. Well, 450 on a fat hog.
Yep. Lily, how about you?
Well, we are currently sitting on a couple litters worth of pigs that are unregisterable, and we do not have a market for them right now other than trying to sell whole and half hog shares. I'm trying to find other routes and find some farms to take them as feeder pigs when they're younger, but we're not having much traction with actually getting feeder pigs off the property. So any and all tips and suggestions are welcome right now.
Where are you located?
So I'm Red Dirt Farm. I'm partners with Dustin Rice out here in Yamhill, Oregon.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And we have a lack of processors out here. Our nearest USDA facility has recently been acquired by a beef processing company out of Washington, and they are pushing pork producers out. So we would have to travel even farther for USDA, and the cut and wrap facilities that are available to us are decent, but I've worked professionally as a butcher in the past, and the cuts are subpar. I also just have really high standards, so I'm having a pretty tough time finding quality places to take cut and wrap for my customers. So,
Do you have ethnic populations in your area? The other thing I'm also looking to do is getting a custom processing set up on the farm. It seems like it's pretty simple, but when you first read it, it might sound different than it is. But from what I understand, it's not too terrible.
yeah, I've been looking into it because we've been, Dustin's been working steadily over winter to put up a barn that we've desperately needed to relieve some stress off of our garage and our greenhouse. And I've been looking into specs for building permits for how do we legally go about getting this permit process going if we wanted to use that as a facility in the future. And something that I actually wanted to bring up tonight at some point is, does anybody have any experience with trying to facilitate getting USDA mobile butchers? Because that's something that Oregon desperately needs right now.
I don't. Lily, let me ask you a question. Have you ever talked to Wendy Parker?
I have not.
Okay, I'm going to put you in contact with her.
Okay.
And the reason why is because she's in Oregon as well. And she would probably be able to help you as far as maybe some other options to. She's been there a long time and she's done this for a long time. And most of her market is cuts and pulls and halves. And let me just talk to her and I'll put her in touch with you. Okay.
Sure. Thank you. I'd be much appreciated.
And I'm sorry, I apologize. I didn't recognize the name. I talked to you with Molly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just bad with names.
Oh, no,
So-
you're fine. I don't often get to participate in these meetings. And I don't stay as active on the Facebook pages as I should. I've been kind of just observing and soaking up knowledge as I can.
So I will shoot you a message on Messenger tomorrow and put you in contact with her, okay?
Great. Thank you so much.
And then I need to ask you and Dustin a few other questions as well. So
Sure.
that'll work good. Chantel?
Hey, I wanted to say about the mobile butchering processing. We're actually in the process of doing that in North Carolina, primarily because a lot of the same issues you guys are talking about with access to processing, quality of, that process and the output, depending on what market you're going to sell in, obviously. But I would be happy to share some of that process after we get a little bit more into the thick of things. Right now, we're just sort of weeding through which inspection entity we want to go through. There's a difference between the USDA federal and then we have a state. And because there's a shortage of supply of agents, there's some crossover right now between the two entities kind of covering for each other, if you will, which is a bit different than the custom exempt. But what we're looking at is actually building a mobile facility that we can use for our own animals as inspected, and then also offer a service of mobile processing. So, doing that on people's farms, and maybe even the potential of renting the unit out. I just know there's so many other farmers in this area who are just having a hard time in general, just finding access. Like, I couldn't go in right now and get a date maybe a year out. I mean, that's hard. I mean, that's hard to base, your whole production, everything, monetarily that you've put in on a hope that your animals are going to make it that far, that they're going to be at the right stage for, where you need them to be, and that you're going to have it sold, and ready to move at that point. So.
Chantel, where are you located in North Carolina?
I'm in central North Carolina. So right now I live in Kernersville, but this property that we're moving to is in King.
Okay.
So,
I'll be in Raleigh in 2 weeks. If you've
Okay.
got some time, I'd love to meet up with you. I'm actually originally from North Carolina.
I was
just
going to say, you
Oregon.
don't sound like you're from out there.
No, I'm not at all. But yeah, I'll be in North Carolina. I'd love to set up a time with you and see if it matches with our schedules and
Sure.
pick your brain.
Chantel, could I ask you for a favor? We're trying to work on our Facebook group to be very informative, be very, for us as a board to share what's going on, but also for everybody to kind of post what's working for them and their breeding stock and their improvements as they go along. Could I get you to kind of do some posts as you go along on this to kind of say where you're at and where you're going with it?
Yeah, I'd love to. We're actually about to do a pretty big social media push with everything that we're doing with our farming. I really haven't really told a whole bunch of people that this is what we're doing yet. So I've kind of held this little project back just a little bit until I got the go ahead with the county and whatnot.
Right.
Because we have county and then we have city and then we have state, and it's just like they're all trying to decide where we fit in because this is still a new thing that's going on. And so they're all kind of giving some pushback in different areas of like, well, who do you actually belong under for regulation?
Right. How far are you from all the old confinements out there and all that stuff?
The confinements? I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, how far are you from the whole Smithfield world out there in North Carolina?
Oh, yeah. That's mostly on the coast. We're central. Yeah,
Gotcha.
we're central and maybe a little bit, we're like on the edge of the foothills kind of, and like a little bit mountain, not like, we're not like, I'm trying to think what's over that way.
We refer to that as down east. So it's
Yeah, it's not,
past the Piedmont into the coastal plains is
yeah. We're
located.
Western Piedmont for sure.
Jim?
There we go. What can I do for you?
Well, I'm just, asking questions as far as your marketing and of non-breeding stock and, what you're
Well,
doing.
Sure. Most of my marketing, I'm doing the feeder pigs, farmers market, and selling whole pigs to. I forget you were talking about the Asian people. These guys aren't Asian. There's a group of islands off the coast of Hawaii, and I forget the name of them. Marshall Islands. There's a group of people from the Marshall Islands that live around me, and they discovered I had these red wattles last year. So I've been getting, I started getting sales from them, and we're killing here, and they're processing there here, and I've got a big roaster that I built. And so they're roasting their hogs here and then taking them with them.
Oh, wow.
So it's just a charcoal fired roaster. And I provide the hickory chips for them, and they bring their charcoal, and as soon as they get the pig cleaned, they throw it on the it's been in the fall, so they were hanging it in my barn overnight. Then coming back the next morning and roasting it on the grill. These guys, they're used to doing that, the pigs in the ground. That's what they do at the Marshall Islands.
Gotcha.
They're trying to talk me into digging a pit to do pigs here at my house.
Have you ever had that pork
No,
that come out of a hole in the ground?
no, I have not.
Oh my God. It is unbelievably tender.
We used to do them like that out in Arizona, out in the desert. Turkeys at Thanksgiving, all kinds of stuff.
Yep. It is unbelievably tender. So does anybody else have anything tonight?
Well, I've got a question about the portable processing. How can you get any kind of certification, USDA or state? Because in Ohio, you have to have an inspector on site. If it's a state inspection, it's usually just for the kill. After the pigs dispatched, they take off and that's it. If it's USDA, they got to be there for the whole process. How's that work with mobile processing?
So,
So-
as far as here in North Carolina, I'll just tell you, going through the process and again, trying to figure out which route to go with. What we have here is what's called custom exempt. So, we get like a once in a while inspection of the unit that makes sure that we have standards in place and that we're following general guidelines and sanitation, you know, animal welfare, all of that. But really what that means is that I can go to somebody's farm and process their animal not for sale. So not for retail sale. It is that person's animal. Okay. Versus a state inspection or a USDA inspection, which is what we're looking at doing a combo unit. So that's why there's some discrepancy. They don't know who to put us under because I'm saying I want a portion of my sales to go to farmers market for sale. So for example, Fridays, I do all of my inspected animals separately at my home base, the same time, the same place, and we have an inspector to come out just on that day. Everything else that I do is mostly going to be custom exempt. Now, to throw a wrench in there, if you're doing value added products, like let's say you want to go ahead and do, you know, pork snack sticks or something like that, we're also going for a dual jurisdiction for commercial kitchen for the same unit, whereas we'll have a separate space in that unit for just the value added. And that sounds really complicated, but really it's like, why spend the money on different units when I can do the whole thing in one, as long as all of my HACCP, my SOPs, all of those things are the same and the entities in your state agree with that, then there really shouldn't be much issue. You're just looking at like county and like city ordinances and things like that and waste disposal.
Right. Every state's going to be different.
Correct.
The state inspection in Ohio will if I take it to a butcher that is just state inspected, they're going to label it not for sale every time, not for resale.
Right.
And for me to do a resellable product, I have to go to USDA in Ohio.
Correct.
We're-
Yeah, that's the same.
Okay.
That's it for me. Yeah.
Anybody else have anything tonight?
Oh, I did a couple upgrades my barn this last month that have been really beneficial. So I ported Wi-Fi into my barns, so now I have cameras and like, so all my spring farrowings, like I have noise monitors set, and I can see my barn from front to back, every single stall and right in there. And so I've done 9 farrowings in the last 3 weeks. And every single one of them, on the first one to slide out, I get a text message telling me to go to the barn. So that's been pretty good. And like, even when we were talking, I checked on them a few times and all that. And it was relatively inexpensive to put together, and it uses my home Wi-Fi network. So, and I'm porting my stuff around 1,500 feet from the house in different directions. The other thing I did was put in I don't have the cold issues people do, but I do maybe once in a while get freezing water, and then so the automated water doesn't work. So now I added a circulator pump and a hot water mixer in, so when it drops below a certain temperature, it'll run. So then I don't have to worry about water.
And that
So-
does that automatically?
Yeah, it's just on a thermostat. Right now it's on just a normal like house thermostat. Say if it goes under 38 degrees in the barn, it just starts looping. Later I'm gonna probably coordinate it with the in pipe temperature, you know, with the probe inside the pipes.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's been really good. So I haven't had to go out and water and anything this winter.
Nipples, waters, what are you
I have
using?
all nipples. My whole barn's nipples. All my piglets are on nipples. Everything in my. I don't do any buckets or anything anymore.
Do they have the cup under the nipple, or are they dripping on the floor?
So I run a pressure reduce. I run the regular, the gravity feed nipples because I don't like the pressure nipples with the real fine screen.
Right.
But then I take, for like an RV for getting the water pressure down.
Yep.
So then I'll drop my barn water pressure to about 10 PSI instead of the normal 45 to 60 range.
Right.
And it's mainly the summer I have problems where they like to pool. Right now in the winter, I run full pressure so I don't have ice issues in the downspouts,
Right. Right.
But generally they don't make a big wet mess, except for the hot months, is when if they're locked in the barn or kind of like in that area and it's hot, they'll make a mess if you have full pressure. But yeah, the pressure regulator works real well, Mark.
Good. Okay. Anybody else? I think it was a great discussion tonight.
Put something up on like what parts and stuff you use to do that.
For the loop system?
Yeah.
The what? Do you want me to just draw a diagram kind of? Because I'm probably next year, my plan is to probably incorporate that with, like the radiant flooring. I was going to put in little 2x4 slabs in my sow stalls and then have metal bars over it so the sow can't lay on it. And probably it's going to tie into the same exact instant hot water heater that the circulator is going to.
Yeah.
But you don't need this. You don't need the hot water heater, depending on your temperature.
Yeah, because like
I'll get that up.
We had that big cold spell, like all my stuff froze out at the nipples. Even though I got heaters in there, it all froze up. So I'm trying to figure something out because eventually I ain't gonna have my kids here to help me out. So I got to figure.
How many hogs do you have in a pen? I guess that would be because like my water's running around, like I have it set to try to keep it around like 45 degrees or so. It still depends on them pressing it from time to time, the way I've got it set up. There's you could probably get your heating element more towards the nipple if that's a freezing up issue, but most of my pens have 30 to 50 hogs in them, except for the sows,
Yeah, that's the well, I only keep like 4 sows here, and then my 1 boar's in a pen, and then I don't feed out that many.
So the nipples that froze on me this winter with my water system still works, but the nipple freeze on this, if they don't mess with it all night, it just takes a really quick hit of like I'll just torch the downpipe real quick, the standpipe, that it's connected to with the nipple.
Yeah.
And it's running within seconds. It unfreezes right away. It's only directly at the nipple, so it's like 10 seconds with the little torch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, later I might add a heating element, but it's more complicated. You know what I mean? To put a heating element inside of the pipe down right behind the nipple.
Yeah.
You follow me? So like if you drop that thermocouple inside of there, and then yeah, I mean, ideally I'd do that.
Doing that, hooking it all up to water lines in there, and then
yeah. But I mean, the recirculator will fix your problem 9 out of 10, 90%. It'll just be those brutal cold days where you'll have to thaw out the actual nipple itself.
Yeah,
would be my guess.
Because most of the time here it won't freeze up.
Yeah, I'll draw a schematic of that, and I'll either post it up or send it to Mark to post up somewhere or whatnot in the next over the weekend. I promise by the end of the weekend.
So when you send it to me, I'll send it back to you and tell you to post it.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Well,
okie doke.
let's call it a night. I think this was good. All right. Appreciate everybody taking part. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night, Mark. Good night, everybody.
Night.